Life has this weird way of making you believe everything's perfect just before it slams you with a reality check. I'm Arthur, 36, a software engineer, doing pretty well for myself, or at least I thought I was. A stable job, a house, and until recently, what I'd have called a happy marriage. I guess everyone starts these stories thinking they've got it all, right? It was no different for me. I met Lily about 6 years ago at some tech law conference I was speaking at. She's a lawyer, sharp as hell, and trust me, I was no match for her when it came to that razor-sharp intellect. She caught my eye instantly. That confidence, the way she owned the room with just her words. Honestly, it was a bit intimidating, but in the best way possible. She was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Smart, driven, beautiful. When we started dating, it felt like we were this perfect power couple, Her smashing it in her career, me in mine, and we just clicked. I was lucky, or so I thought. Fast forward 5 years into marriage, and life seemed stable. I hate that word now. We were living what people would probably call the dream. Good jobs, good money, a baby on the way. Lily was 8 months pregnant, and we were doing all the things you do when you're expecting your first kid. I still remember us setting up the nursery, discussing baby names, laughing about how we were going to handle sleepless nights once the baby arrived. I was genuinely excited to be a dad. All the typical family man stuff, right? But here's the thing. Sometimes life's biggest red flags come in the smallest moments. I noticed Lily acting different, more distant. She'd spend more time on her phone, and when I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd just smile and brush it off. Pregnancy nerves, she'd say, like that explained everything. She started going out more too, meeting up with old friends, or so she claimed. I wanted to believe her, I wanted to believe that she was just stressed about the baby, that everything was fine between us. But deep down, something didn't feel right. I remember asking her about it one night, trying to be casual about it. We were sitting on the couch, and she was scrolling through her phone like always. "Hey, you've been going out a lot lately," I said, not accusing, just curious. "Everything okay?" She looked up at me with that smile. Man, I used to love that smile, but now it just pisses me off when I think about it. It's just pregnancy stuff, I get anxious, and seeing friends helps, she said so casually. Like that was supposed to make everything okay. I let it slide, figuring I was just being paranoid, but it kept eating at me. I think that's where it all started going downhill, even if I didn't realize it at the time. It's crazy how you can be so blind to the signs. You convince yourself that everything's okay because the alternative, the truth, is just too hard to face. We kept going with life, pretending everything was normal, and I convinced myself that I was just overthinking. After all, we were about to have a kid together. What kind of person messes around when they're 8 months pregnant, right? But looking back now, all the pieces were there like a puzzle I didn't want to put together. She'd be out late, meeting friends more often than she should have been, glued to her phone, always with some excuse. I guess I just didn't want to believe it. I was too focused on the future we were supposed to have, me, her, and the baby. The thing is, when you're that invested in someone, you never see the cracks forming until it's too late. And trust me, those cracks were there, waiting to shatter everything. You know how they say life can turn on a dime? That's exactly what happened to me. It was a regular Saturday evening. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another weekend like any other. Lily had mentioned she was meeting up with an old friend, someone she hadn't seen in years, apparently. I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? We had our routines, our lives, and I had no reason to suspect anything at that point. So, like any trusting idiot, I wished her a good time and stayed home. She even kissed me on her way out, like everything was perfectly normal. Thinking back, I hate myself for not noticing the little things. With the house all to myself, I figured I'd get some work done. I'm the type of guy who can lose himself in a project, especially when things are quiet. A few hours passed, and I realized we were low on groceries. Lily wouldn't be back for a while, so I decided to head out and grab a few things from the store. Harmless, right? Driving down the road, I wasn't thinking about much. Just the usual, like what we'd need for the week ahead. And then, out of nowhere, I saw her car. It was parked near this little cafe, tucked in a side street. My heart didn't even skip a beat at first. I knew Lily had gone out, so it made sense her car would be there, right? She was meeting a friend, after all. But as I got closer, something felt off. I couldn't explain it, But this weird pit started growing in my stomach. You know the kind. The kind that tells you something's wrong even when you don't have all the facts. Still, I try to brush it off. I told myself I was just being paranoid. But when I got closer, I saw her. Sitting in the driver's seat, she wasn't alone. There was a guy in the passenger seat, someone I didn't recognize. I thought maybe it was that old friend she mentioned. Lily knew a lot of people, and I wasn't the type to question every little thing. But something about the way they were sitting, the way they were leaning toward each other, I don't know. It just didn't feel right. And then it happened. In a moment that's burned into my brain, I watched as Lily leaned over and started giving him a blowjob. Right there in our car in public, as if the whole world didn't exist. I don't even know how to explain what went through my mind. It was like everything inside me snapped all at once. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The woman I'd spent the last 6 years of my life with, the mother of my unborn child, was in that car with some random guy doing that. For a second, I couldn't move. I was frozen, staring at the scene like it was happening in slow motion. My brain couldn't catch up with what my eyes were seeing. But when it did, I lost it. Rage like I've never felt before just exploded inside me. Before I even knew what I was doing, I slammed the car in a park and stormed over to them. I don't even think I had a plan. I just wanted it to stop. I wanted to erase what I'd seen, to make it go away, to make the pain stop. I yanked open the car door, and without thinking, I laid into him. Fists flying, punching him over and over. I didn't care who he was, didn't care about the consequences. I just wanted to hurt him. Maybe part of me wanted to hurt her too, but I couldn't. The look of shock on her face was burned into my mind, and honestly, I didn't even hear the screams until later. I was just so focused on stopping the nightmare that my life had suddenly become. I think she screamed for me to stop. Maybe she didn't. I can't remember. Everything was a blur, except for the pain, anger, and betrayal that were drowning me. I didn't stop until I felt someone pulling me off the guy. It was all so fast, but it felt like forever. That's when I heard the sirens. The sirens. God, I can still hear them, piercing through the rage, through the mess I'd made. I didn't even realize how bad things had gotten until I felt hands pulling me away from the guy. I turned around and there they were, 2 cops. They must have seen the whole thing unfold because I didn't even get a chance to explain. Not that I had any explanation. I was still in shock myself, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. The guy Lily's whatever he was looked like hell. My fists had done their job, and he was bleeding from his nose and mouth, holding his hands up like he was the victim. Maybe in the eyes of the law, he was, but in mine, he deserved every damn punch. Sir, back off. One of the cops shouted at me, his hand already resting on his gun like I was some kind of threat. I guess to them, they didn't waste time. I was cuffed and thrown into the back of a police car before I even had a chance to think. As they shoved me into the seat, I caught one last look at Lily. She was still sitting in the car, frozen, like she couldn't believe what had just happened. I wanted to scream at her, to ask her why, but the words wouldn't come. Not then. The only thing I felt was a kind of numbness. It was like my brain had shut down, refusing to process the reality I was facing. The ride to the station was a blur. The whole time, I just kept replaying what I saw in my head over and over again. My wife, my pregnant wife, doing that with some random guy. And me, beating the hell out of him like a madman. How the hell did things get here? Where did I go wrong? Sitting in a holding cell, it finally hit me. My life was over. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, was a joke. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had betrayed me in the most disgusting way possible. I felt sick. The anger hadn't gone away. It was still there, boiling just beneath the surface, but now it was mixed with something else. A deep, gut-wrenching sadness. Loss. That's what it felt like. Like I'd lost everything in a single night. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the walls, trying to make sense of it all. Time didn't matter. Hell, nothing seemed to matter anymore. But eventually, the door opened, and there she was. Lily. Tears streamed down her face. Her makeup smeared from crying, but I wasn't moved. Not by the tears, not by the look of regret she tried to put on. She was always a good actress when she wanted to be, but this time, I saw through it. Or maybe I just didn't care anymore. Arthur, please, she sobbed, stepping toward me like she wanted to hug me. I flinched back, not even wanting her near me. The very sight of her made my stomach turn. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I wanted to laugh. You don't know what you were thinking? That's what she had to say. After everything I just witnessed, after the humiliation and betrayal? But I didn't laugh. I just stared at her, my fists clenched at my sides, trying to control the storm of emotions threatening to rip me apart. It was a mistake, I swear, she went on, her voice trembling like she was the one who had been wronged. I don't know what came over me. It was the stress, the pregnancy. I wasn't in my right mind. Please, Arthur, you have to believe me. Believe her? After what I'd seen, I could still picture it. Her with that man, doing something that was supposed to be intimate between us, between a husband and wife. And she expected me to believe it was just stress? That she wasn't in her right mind? Bullshit. I finally said, my voice low but seething with rage. You weren't in your right mind? Lily, you were in that car, you chose to do that. Don't even try to blame this on the pregnancy. Don't you dare. She flinched at my words, her tears falling harder now, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I was done playing the fool. I love you, she whispered, stepping closer again. I made a mistake, but it doesn't change the fact that I love you. Please, Arthur, we can fix this. We can work through it. Don't throw everything away. I felt like I was losing my mind. How could she stand there, after what she did, and talk about love? About fixing things? Did she think I was that weak, that blind? Did she really believe I could just forget what I'd seen and go back to the way things were? Fix this? I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. How do you fix that, Lily? How do you fix seeing your wife with another man, doing that? She didn't have an answer. All she could do was cry and beg and make excuses. Every word out of her mouth just pissed me off more. She tried to tell me it was a one-time thing, that she didn't know why she did it. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. Arthur, please, we have a baby on the way. You can't leave us. I need you. We need you. And there it was, the emotional manipulation. She used the baby as a shield, like somehow the fact that she was pregnant meant I had to forgive her. Like I owed her another chance because of the life growing inside her. But all I could think about was whether that baby was even mine. Because after what I saw, how could I be sure of anything? I'm going to get a DNA test, I said flatly, the words coming out like a death sentence. And if that baby isn't mine, we're done. You hear me, Lily? I'm done. Her face went pale. She didn't expect that. Hell, I didn't even expect it, but I knew it was the truth. I couldn't go on without knowing. And if the baby wasn't mine, there was no coming back from that. Arthur, no, please, she begged, reaching for me, but I stepped back again. I couldn't stand to be near her. Not after everything that had happened. It was a mistake. You don't understand. Stop. I cut her off, my voice cold. I understand more than you think, Lily. And I'm done. I turned away from her, ignoring her sobs, ignoring the way she collapsed into a chair, still pleading for forgiveness. Because at that moment, I realized something. It didn't matter how many excuses she made, how many times she cried or begged. The trust was gone. And without trust, there was nothing left. I was done. Leaving the police station that night, I couldn't shake the image of Lily, broken and crying, begging me to stay. But it didn't matter. Her tears, her apologies, her excuses, they meant nothing. I was done. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into staying, not with her lies, not with the pregnancy. The drive home felt surreal. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles turned white. I could feel the anger simmering beneath the surface, but even more than that, there was this deep, gnawing pain. It was like a part of me had been ripped out and tossed aside. I had trusted her. I had given her everything. And in return, she had betrayed me in the worst possible way. When I got home, I just sat in the car for a few minutes, staring at the house. Our house. The one we had picked out together, where we had planned to raise our child. Now, it felt like nothing more than a shell, an empty reminder of a life that was no longer mine. I couldn't bring myself to go inside, not yet. It was like stepping back into that house meant accepting that this was my reality, that everything I thought I had was gone. Eventually, I forced myself to get out of the car. I walked into the house, the silence hitting me like a physical weight. No laughter, no warmth. Just silence. I stood in the doorway, looking around at the life we had built together. And for the first time, I felt truly alone. The anger started to bubble up again, and before I knew it, I had thrown my keys across the room. They hit the wall with a loud clang, but even that sound felt hollow. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to let out all the rage I had inside, but instead, I just stood there breathing heavily, trying to control the storm that was raging inside me. I couldn't stay in that house. Not that night. I grabbed a bag and stuffed some clothes into it, not even caring what I took. I needed to get out, to clear my head. I wasn't going to let her get to me. I wasn't going to let her use the baby as an excuse to make me stay. Not after what she had done. As I drove to my friend Connor's place, I replayed her words in my head. Her begging, her pleading, her pathetic attempts to justify herself. She actually had the nerve to blame the pregnancy. Like that somehow explained what I had seen. Like the stress of carrying our child was a valid reason for her to cheat on me. It made me sick. Connor was the only person I could think to call. He'd been my closest friend for years, and if anyone could help me sort through this mess, it was him. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I didn't need someone to pat me on the back and tell me it would be okay. I needed someone who would help me figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. When I got to his place, it was late, but he didn't hesitate to let me in. One look at my face, and he knew something was seriously wrong. "Man, what the hell happened?" he asked, his voice full of concern as he led me into the living room. I sat down on his couch, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. I hadn't even processed half of it yet, but the words started spilling out. I told him everything about catching Lily with that guy, about the fight, the arrest, her pathetic excuses. By the time I finished, I could barely breathe. It was like I had been holding it all in, and now that I was finally letting it out, the floodgates had opened. Connor sat there, quiet for a minute, letting it all sink in. Then he shook his head, letting out a low whistle. "Jesus, Arthur, I don't even know what to say. That's messed up." "Yeah," I muttered, rubbing my hands over my face. I don't know what to do, man. She's trying to use the baby, trying to guilt me into staying, but I can't. I can't do this." "You can't stay," he agreed, leaning back in his chair. "You can't trust her anymore, and without trust, what's left?" "Nothing," I said, my voice hoarse. "There's nothing left." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the situation hanging over us. Connor wasn't the type to sugarcoat things, and that's exactly what I needed. I needed someone to tell me the truth, no matter how painful it was. "You need to get a DNA test," Connor finally said, breaking the silence. "You need to know if the baby is even yours." The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course, I'd already considered it, but hearing it out loud made it real. The possibility that the child I had been preparing to raise, the child I had been excited to meet, might not even be mine. It was too much to bear. "I know," I said quietly. "I already told her. I'm not staying until I know for sure." "And if the baby isn't yours?" he asked, his voice careful, like he already knew the answer. "Then I'm done. I'm divorcing her." Connor nodded, but he didn't say anything for a minute. Then he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Arthur, I know this is hell for you, but whatever happens, you're going to get through it. And if that baby is yours, well, we'll figure it out." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that somehow I'd come out of this on the other side. But right then, all I could feel was the crushing weight of betrayal and uncertainty. My life had been turned upside down, and I had no idea what the future held. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at Connor's place, barely eating, barely sleeping, just waiting for the DNA test. I didn't speak to Lily. She called me constantly, leaving voicemail after voicemail, but I ignored them all. I couldn't deal with her right now. Not until I knew the truth. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach turned. I was waiting for that one call. The one that would tell me if my life was going to fall apart completely or if there was still some shred of normalcy left. And then the call came. I'll never forget that day. The day everything I'd feared was confirmed. You think you're ready for it mentally, emotionally. You think after all the sleepless nights, the constant replay of those horrible memories, and the weeks of silence between you and your wife, you'll be able to handle the truth, no matter what. But when it finally hits, it breaks you in ways you can't imagine. The call came early in the morning. I was still at Connor's place, barely functioning at that point. We'd been waiting for weeks. The DNA test was supposed to come in any day, but every hour that passed felt like a lifetime. I thought I was ready for whatever answer they gave me, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. I stared at the phone when it rang, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment everything would change again. Connor was still asleep, and I didn't wake him. I took the call in the quiet, standing in the small kitchen, barely able to breathe as the lab tech's voice came through the line. "Mr. Arthur?" The voice was calm, detached, like they were delivering any other piece of information. To them, this was just a job, just another case file. But to me, this was my whole damn life. Yeah, I managed to say, though my voice sounded hoarse like I'd been screaming for hours. "The DNA test results are in. Unfortunately, the results show that you are not the biological father of the child." That was it. A simple sentence. Clinical. Cold. No emotion. They couldn't have known that those words were a wrecking ball, smashing through whatever was left of my life. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The phone slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a thud, and I just stood there, staring at nothing, the words repeating in my head over and over again. Not the father, not the father, not the father. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Everything I had been preparing for, all the excitement, the plans, the hope gone. Just gone. It wasn't even anger at that moment. It was this deep, soul-crushing sadness that took over. I felt hollow, like someone had carved out my insides and left me with nothing but an empty shell. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't make sense anymore. But eventually, Connor came out, his face groggy, and he saw me. He must have known just by looking at me, because his whole demeanor changed in an instant. "Arthur," he said quietly, stepping closer. I shook my head, unable to get the words out. Connor didn't ask anything more. He just stood there, waiting. Finally, after what felt like forever, I managed to speak. "I'm not the father." There was the reality I had been dreading. The truth that Lily had taken from me not only my trust, but my future as a father. The baby I had been preparing for wasn't mine. She had cheated on me, and now I had nothing. Connor cursed under his breath and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. He didn't say anything else because, honestly, what was there to say? What do you say to someone whose entire life just collapsed in front of them? After the shock wore off, the anger came back, hot and sharp like a knife in my gut. I grabbed my phone and listened to the voicemails Lily had left me over the past few days. I hadn't bothered listening to them before, but now I needed to hear what she had to say, if only to fuel the fire burning inside me. Her voice filled the air as I pressed play. "Arthur, please call me. I know you're angry, but we need to talk. Please, for the baby's sake." Next voicemail. "I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. You can't just leave us like this. I made a mistake, but we can get through this. We have to, for our family." I felt sick. She had the nerve to keep saying our family. Like I was still part of it, like she hadn't already destroyed everything. I hit delete on each message, my hands shaking as I went through them one by one. They were all the same. Apologies. Begging. Empty words. She didn't even know the results yet. She didn't know that I was no longer tied to her or that baby. And when she found out, I couldn't even imagine her reaction, but I didn't care. I was done. It wasn't until later that day when I finally heard from her. She called me, her voice panicked, asking if I'd gotten the results. "Arthur, did you get the test back? Please, talk to me." I stayed silent for a moment, letting her sit in that panic, letting her squirm. She deserved to feel every bit of pain she had caused me. "Yeah," I said flatly, my voice void of any emotion. And she hesitated, her breath hitching. Is it yours?" I wanted to laugh, but instead, all I felt was disgust. How could she even ask that, after everything? "No, Lily. It's not mine," I said, the words cold and final. Her gasp on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't expected this. She had actually convinced herself that I would still be tied to her, that I would stay even after everything. "Arthur, we're done." I cut her off, my voice firm. "I'm filing for divorce." There's nothing left to talk about. Please, she cried, her voice cracking. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen. We can still fix this. Fix what, Lily? You slept with another man, got pregnant, and now you're trying to play the victim? There's nothing to fix. It's over. She kept crying, kept begging, but I was already done. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I was finally free. Free from her lies, from the manipulation, from the life I thought we were building together. I called my lawyer that afternoon and started the process. No amount of her tears or apologies could change what I had decided. This marriage was over. The moment I hung up that phone, it felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. It wasn't relief exactly. It was something colder, more final. The kind of peace that comes after you've made a decision that can't be undone. I wasn't Arthur, the husband, anymore. I wasn't the expectant father, preparing to welcome a child into the world. That life was dead, buried under the wreckage Lily had left behind. What I had now was clarity. It was over, and there was no going back. I filed for divorce the next morning. I didn't bother telling Lily in advance. There was nothing to discuss. She'd made her choices, and now I was making mine. The paperwork was straightforward enough. My lawyer, who'd handled this kind of thing 1,000 times, assured me that it would be a smooth process as long as we both agreed to terms. What he didn't account for was Lily's desperation. You'd think someone caught in the act like she had been, someone who had literally brought another man's child into the world, would try to end things quietly, with as little drama as possible. But no, Lily wasn't about to let me walk away without a fight. Within days of filing, the calls started coming. First, it was Lily, leaving voicemail after voicemail, her voice frantic. Every time she spoke, it was the same thing, apologies, desperate attempts to convince me that we could still make it work. For the baby, she kept saying. Not my baby, I reminded myself every time I heard those words. I didn't even bother calling her back. There was no point. I'd already checked out. When I didn't respond, she escalated. One night, I got back to Connor's place, still my refuge while everything played out, and found her sitting on the front steps, her face streaked with tears. She must have driven over in some last-ditch attempt to sway me, but I wasn't in the mood. I was tired of her, tired of the drama, tired of pretending like we had anything left to salvage. What are you doing here, Lily? I asked, my voice flat. No patience left for the theatrics. We need to talk, Arthur, she pleaded, standing up and wiping her face like that would somehow make me forget everything she'd done. Please, we can't end it like this. I made a mistake, but we can fix it. We can still be a family. A family? I almost laughed. We haven't been a family for a long time, Lily. You killed that when you decided to cheat on me. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. The truth hurt, and she needed to hear it. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she cried, stepping toward me. It was a mistake, one stupid mistake. Please, don't throw everything away because of one bad choice. One bad choice. I snapped, my anger bubbling up again. That wasn't just some bad choice, Lily. You betrayed me, and then you tried to lie your way out of it. You kept going, even after I caught you. And now you're trying to use the baby, not even mine, as some kind of bargaining chip to make me stay? Her face paled, and for a moment, she seemed genuinely at a loss for words. I could see the panic in her eyes, the realization that there was no coming back from this. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking, but I wasn't in the mood for apologies anymore. I don't care, Lily. It's over. We're done. I've already filed for divorce. The papers are in the mail, and you're going to sign them. There's nothing left to talk about. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating. I could see the defeat in her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged like the fight had finally drained out of her. She wasn't used to losing. Not like this. Lily had always been in control, always the one with the upper hand. But not anymore. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, might scream, or throw one last tantrum to try and guilt me into staying. But instead, she just stood there, tears streaming down her face, her lips trembling. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anything. I was numb. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll sign the papers. And just like that, it was over. She turned and walked to her car, not looking back, not saying another word. I watched her go, but there was no sense of triumph or satisfaction. Just a deep, empty ache. Even though I was the one ending it, I still couldn't believe how we had ended up here. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and legal meetings. The divorce process moved quickly, which was a blessing in itself. Lily, true to her word, signed the papers without much of a fight. Maybe she finally realized that no amount of tears or manipulation was going to change my mind. I'd heard through the grapevine that she had moved in with the guy she'd cheated with. That should have made me feel something, anger, jealousy, anything, but instead it was just nothing. I didn't go back to our house after the papers were signed. I couldn't. It was no longer a home, just a place filled with too many memories that didn't feel real anymore. I left it to Lily. Let her live in the shell of what we once had. I was done with it. As for me, I stayed with Connor for a while longer, trying to piece together what my life was supposed to look like now. There were no dramatic outbursts, no climactic moments of closure. Just quiet, steady acceptance. The kind that creeps up on you when you realize that you're still standing, even after everything. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the anger would come back, and I'd lie awake, replaying everything in my mind, wondering if there had been some moment, some choice I could have made differently that would have changed the outcome. But in the end, I always came to the same conclusion. Lily had made her choices. And now I was making mine. Cutting ties wasn't just about signing the papers and moving out of the house. It was about letting go of everything we had been, or at least everything I thought we were. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was losing the future I had imagined. The family, the child, the life we had been building. That was the real loss, and that was what took the longest to accept. But I did. Slowly, painfully, I began to accept it. I cut her off completely. No more calls, no more texts. I didn't need her updates, her apologies, or her attempts at reconciliation. I didn't need anything from her anymore. The last piece of the puzzle was the house. I sold it, of course. The minute the papers were finalized, I got rid of that place and everything in it. I didn't want any reminders of the life I was leaving behind. It was time for a fresh start, even if I wasn't sure what that looked like yet. By the time the sale went through, it felt like I had finally closed the door on that chapter of my life. I was free. I wish I could say that after the divorce, everything fell into place, that I just moved on and life got better like flipping a switch. But that's not how it works. Healing doesn't happen overnight. The truth is, even after the papers were signed, even after I cut all ties with Lily, I still felt like I was carrying the weight of it all. There's no easy way to get over the betrayal, the humiliation, the anger. It lingers, no matter how much you try to shove it down. For the first few months, I was living in survival mode. Just going through the motions, working, keeping busy, trying not to think too much. But even then, there were times when everything would catch up with me. I'd find myself replaying scenes in my head. Her with that man, the lies she told, the look on her face when I told her it was over. I hated that she still had that power over me, that even after all this, she could still take up space in my mind. But time has a way of dulling the sharp edges of pain. Slowly, bit by bit, I started to feel like myself again. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in a while, threw myself into work, and even started thinking about what came next for me. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but I was ready to start living my life again on my own terms. Then, one day, out of the blue, I got some news about Lily. It came from a mutual friend, one of those people who somehow manages to stay connected to everyone, even after things fall apart. I hadn't asked for an update, but there it was. "Hey man, did you hear about Lily?" the text read. I stared at my phone, a knot forming in my stomach. Part of me didn't want to know. I had done everything I could to move on, to cut her out of my life. But curiosity got the better of me, and before I could stop myself, I typed back, "No, what about her?" The reply came almost instantly. "She's with that guy now, the one you caught her with. But get this, he's in jail. Domestic violence. Apparently, he's been beating the shit out of her." For a second, I couldn't believe what I was reading. I blinked, reread the message, and felt a strange, unsettling mixture of emotions. Anger, disgust, a twisted sense of irony. But most of all, I felt relief. You'd think after everything, I'd feel some kind of satisfaction at the news. You know, the old saying, what goes around comes around. And yeah, there was part of me that thought she deserves it. After all the pain she put me through, after the betrayal, after trying to manipulate me with the baby, she had ended up with someone even worse. It was poetic justice in a way. But honestly, I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sorry for her. Don't get me wrong. What she did to me was unforgivable. She destroyed our marriage, betrayed my trust, and shattered the life we were supposed to have together. But no one deserves to be in a relationship like that. No one deserves to live in fear, to be hurt by someone they're supposed to love. I sat there for a while, processing the news, and realized something. I didn't care about Lily anymore. Not really. Her life, her choices, they were no longer my problem. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. But it wasn't my job to feel anything about it. Not anger, not pity, not revenge. Nothing. I was free from all of it. That's when I knew I had truly moved on. When I could hear about Lily's life and feel nothing. I won't lie and say the road to recovery was easy. It wasn't. Even after the divorce. Even after hearing about Lily's mess of a life, it took time to rebuild myself. You don't just bounce back from that kind of betrayal. It leaves scars, deep ones. But those scars heal, slowly but surely. I started to piece my life back together, one step at a time. I moved into a new place, not too fancy, but mine. I focused on work, on my friends, on myself. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about someone else's expectations, someone else's needs. It was just me figuring out what I wanted from life. People would ask me if I was ready to start dating again. At first, I wasn't. The thought of trusting someone, of opening myself up to that kind of vulnerability again, scared the hell out of me. But eventually something shifted. It wasn't like I woke up one day and thought, okay, I'm ready. It was more gradual than that. I started meeting new people, going out again, dipping my toes back into the world of relationships. And yeah, I met someone, not in some dramatic, love-at-first-sight way. It was slow, casual, just a woman I met through friends. Her name's Claire. She's different from Lily in all the best ways. Honest, kind, no games, no bullshit. It's been refreshing, to say the least. We're taking things slow. I'm not rushing into anything because I've learned my lesson about that. But for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm actually excited about the future. I can picture myself happy again, building something new, something real. And that's not something I thought I'd feel after everything that happened. Looking back, I realized that Lily's betrayal, as devastating as it was, gave me a new perspective. It forced me to reevaluate my life, to see things for what they really were. And yeah, it was hell. But in a way, it was also the thing that set me free. I'm stronger now, more sure of who I am and what I want. The scars are still there, but they don't hurt as much anymore. They're just reminders of what I've been through, of what I've survived. I don't know what the future holds for me and Claire, or for my life in general. But I do know this. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm ready to move forward, to keep growing, to live a life that's truly mine. And that, more than anything, is what recovery looks like. It's not about forgetting the past or pretending the pain never happened. It's about taking those experiences, learning from them, and becoming someone stronger on the other side.